Have you ever seen someone make a mistake so expensive it cost them their entire career and shook the stock market? Imagine a flight attendant so blinded by prejudice that she forcibly throws away a disabled girl's custom crutches, calling them trash, all while the girl's mother watches in silence. What the attendant didn't know was that the mother wasn't just a passenger in economy. She was Vivienne Sinclair, the silent owner of the very financing firm keeping the airline afloat. Stay tuned to see how one act of cruelty led to a billion-dollar lawsuit, a public humiliation, and the most satisfying karma you've ever heard. This is the story of the flight attendant who messed with the wrong family. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with the chaotic energy of the holiday rush. At gate B32, the line for transatlantic flight 909 to London Heathrow was already snaking back toward the duty-free shops. Mabel Sinclair, a 12-year-old girl with deep ebony skin and bright, intelligent eyes, adjusted her grip on her forearm crutches. They were not standard hospital-issue aluminum. They were custom-molded carbon fiber, painted a sleek, matte purple, designed to support her frame without weighing down her joints, which suffered from a rare connective tissue disorder. Standing beside her was her mother, Vivienne Sinclair. Vivienne was dressed in a comfortable, nondescript grey tracksuit and wore a simple baseball cap pulled low. To the untrained eye, she looked like an exhausted single mother trying to survive the holiday travel season. There were no visible logos, no flashing jewelry, and no entourage. Just a woman holding her daughter's hand. "Almost there, baby," Vivienne whispered, rubbing Mabel's back. "Legs okay?" "I'm okay, Mom," Mabel said, though she winced slightly as the line surged forward. "I just want to sit down." They were flying Economy Plus. Vivienne could have bought the entire plane if she wished, but she was raising Mabel to stay grounded. She wanted her daughter to understand the real world, not just the bubble of private jets and chauffeurs. It was a lesson in humility, one that was about to be tested. At the ticket counter stood the gate agent, a man named Greg, who looked harried, and beside the jet bridge entrance stood the flight attendant who would be greeting passengers. Her name tag read Tiffany. With platinum blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and a layer of makeup that cracked when she frowned, Tiffany looked at the passengers not as customers, but as cattle. When Mabel and Vivienne reached the front, Mabel moved a bit slower, navigating the transition from the carpet to the hard tile. "Keep it moving, people, we are on a schedule," Tiffany barked, clapping her hands unnecessarily loud. Her eyes landed on Mabel. She didn't see a child, she saw an obstruction. "Ticket!" Tiffany snapped, snapping her fingers at Vivienne. Vivienne handed over the boarding passes, calmly. Tiffany scanned them, her lip curling in a sneer as the machine beeped green. She looked at Mabel's crutches with disdain. "You can't bring those on board," Tiffany said, pointing a manicured nail at the purple supports. "They're a tripping hazard. You need to check them." Vivienne blinked, her voice calm but firm. "Excuse me? These are medical devices. She needs them to walk down the aisle to her seat, and she needs them if she has to use the restroom during the 7-hour flight. FDA regulations and airline policy state they stay with the passenger." Tiffany rolled her eyes, a dramatic, full-body motion. "Look, lady, I don't have time for a debate. The overhead bins are full of holiday gifts. I don't have room for giant metal sticks. Either check them at the gate or you don't fly. We have a wheelchair service to dump her in the seat." "Dump her?" Vivienne repeated, a dangerous chill entering her voice. The air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. "My daughter is not luggage, and these fit under the seat or in the coat closet." "The closet is for first-class coats only," Tiffany scoffed, looking Vivienne up and down, taking in the grey tracksuit. "And you are clearly not first class. Move aside, you're holding up the line." I am not moving until you acknowledge that my daughter has a right to her mobility aids, Vivian said, planting her feet. Tiffany let out a groan of frustration, grabbing her radio. Captain, we have a non-compliant passenger at the gate, refusing to follow crew instructions. She glared at Vivian. Last chance. Hand over the sticks or security escorts you out. Mabel looked up at her mother, eyes wide with fear. Mum, it's okay. I can crawl if I have to. Please, let's just go home. The heartbreak in Mabel's voice was the catalyst. Vivian took a deep breath. She wasn't going to get kicked off. Not yet. She needed to be on that plane to end this properly. Fine, Vivian said, her voice ice-cold. Take them to the cargo hold, but if there is a single scratch on them, you will regret it. Yeah, whatever, Tiffany muttered. She snatched the crutches from Mabel's hands so roughly that Mabel stumbled and had to grab the podium to stop from falling. Tiffany didn't even look back. She tossed the custom carbon fiber supports onto a pile of strollers near the jet bridge door with a careless clatter. Get in the chair. Tiffany pointed to a battered airport wheelchair nearby. Vivian helped Mabel into the seat, her jaw set so hard her teeth ached. As she pushed her daughter down the jet bridge, she pulled out her phone. She didn't text a friend or a husband. She opened an app that very few people in the world had access to, the direct executive communication line for Pegasus Global Holdings. She typed one message to her chief legal officer, Arthur Pendleton. Pull the acquisition files for Stratosphere Airlines. Now, and find out who the lead purser is on Flight 909. The flight was agonizing. Mabel was seated in 14B, a window seat, while Vivian took the middle. The plane was packed. The air was stale, smelling of reheated coffee and recycled anxiety. For the first 2 hours, Vivian remained silent, typing furiously on her phone via the in-flight Wi-Fi. She was compiling a dossier. She wasn't just a wealthy woman. Vivian Sinclair was the majority shareholder of the venture capital firm that had just approved a $400 million bridge loan to keep this specific airline, Stratosphere, from bankruptcy. Technically, she owned the debt on the very plane they were sitting in. Mabel needed to use the restroom. Mum, she whispered, I really need to go. Vivian looked around. The fasten seatbelt sign was off. She pressed the call button. 3 minutes passed. Nothing. She pressed it again. Finally, Tiffany appeared, looking annoyed. She was holding a pot of coffee, clearly in the middle of service for the premium cabin. What is it now? I told you, no drinks until we finish the meal service. My daughter needs the onboard wheelchair to get to the lavatory, Vivian said, since you took her crutches. Tiffany sighed, blowing a stray hair out of her face. The aisle chair is buried behind the beverage carts in the back galley. I can't get to it right now. She'll have to wait. She is a child and she has a medical condition, Vivian said, her voice rising slightly. She cannot wait an hour for you to finish serving coffee. Then she should have worn a diaper, Tiffany said, loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. A collective gasp went through the cabin. A man in the aisle seat, a businessman named Mr. Henderson, looked up from his tablet. Hey, that's uncalled for. Just get the kid the chair. Stay out of it, sir, or you'll be written up for interfering with a flight crew, Tiffany snapped at him. She turned back to Vivian. Look, if she really has to go, she can hop. It's not far. Vivian unbuckled her seatbelt. Excuse me? You heard me. The carts are blocking the aisle. I am not moving 300 pounds of catering just so she can pee. Deal with it. Tiffany spun on her heel and marched back toward first class, the curtain swishing shut behind her. Mabel was trembling, tears streaming down her face. Mum, I can't hold it. Vivian looked at her daughter, seeing the humiliation burning in her eyes. You won't have to hop, Mabel. Vivian stood up. She was not a large woman, but in that moment she looked 10 feet tall. She turned to Mr. Henderson. "Sir, would you mind helping me support her to the front? The first-class lavatory is closer." "Absolutely," Mr. Henderson said, unbuckling immediately. Together they supported Mabel, Vivienne on one side, the kind stranger on the other. Mabel dragged her legs, wincing with every step as they shuffled slowly toward the first-class curtain. When they breached the curtain, Tiffany was standing in the galley, laughing with the pilot who had stepped out for a break. She saw them and her face went red. "What do you think you're doing?" Tiffany shrieked. "This is a secure cabin. Economy passengers are not allowed forward of the curtain." "She is using the restroom," Vivienne said, moving forward. Tiffany stepped in front of the lavatory door, blocking it with her body. "No, go back to your seats. This is a federal violation. Captain, arrest them." The captain, a grey-haired man named Captain Miller, looked confused. "Tiffany, what is going on?" "These passengers are aggressive. They pushed past the curtain." Tiffany lied, her voice shrill. Vivian stopped. She let go of Mabel, ensuring Mr. Henderson had her safe. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a black card. It wasn't a credit card. It was a matte black titanium ID card with a gold Pegasus logo embossed on it. She held it up to the captain's face. "Captain Miller," Vivian said, her voice calm, precise, and terrifying. "My name is Vivian Sinclair. I suggest you ask your lead flight attendant to step aside before I make a phone call that grounds this entire fleet before we even touch the tarmac." Captain Miller squinted at the card. His eyes widened. He recognized the logo. Everyone in aviation knew Pegasus Global. They were the ones who bought airlines, stripped them, and sold the parts if they weren't profitable. "Miss Sinclair?" the captain stammered. I didn't know you were on board." "Clearly," Vivian said. "Now let my daughter use the restroom. And Tiffany?" She turned her gaze to the flight attendant, who looked confused but still defiant. "What is this? Some fake ID?" Tiffany scoffed. "I don't care who you think you are. Get back to coach." "Tiffany, move!" Captain Miller barked, his voice cracking with panic. "Now!" Tiffany jumped, startled by the captain's tone. She stepped aside, and Vivian helped Mabel into the lavatory. As the door clicked shut, Vivian turned to the captain. "Captain, I want the name of your station manager at Heathrow and the direct line to the CEO of Stratosphere. Oh wait, I don't need the CEO's number. I have it." "Ms. Sinclair, please. There must be a misunderstanding," the captain pleaded, wiping sweat from his brow. "The misunderstanding," Vivian said, pointing at Tiffany, "is that she thinks she holds the power here because she wears a badge. She threw my daughter's custom mobility aids into the cargo hold like garbage and told her to wear a diaper. You have 3 hours until we land. I suggest you spend them praying that those crutches are intact." The rest of the flight was silent in a terrified way. Tiffany had been ordered by the captain to stay in the rear galley and not interact with row 14. Another flight attendant, a kind young woman named Sarah, brought Mabel water, extra pillows, and snacks from first class, apologizing profusely in hushed tones. Vivian didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She spent the entire flight on the Wi-Fi. She was exchanging emails with her legal team in London and New York. Subject: Stratosphere Incident, Breach of Contract. From A. Pendleton, Legal. To V. Sinclair Vivienne, we have reviewed the carriage contract. Clause 14b regarding accessibility rights was flagrantly violated. Furthermore, we've done a background check on the attendant, Tiffany Roach. 3 prior complaints for discrimination, all dismissed by middle management. The airline has a systemic issue. We can pivot the debt restructuring. If you call in the loan clause 4.2, due to reputational damage, They are insolvent within 24 hours. Vivian replied with one word: prepare. When the plane began its descent into London, the atmosphere was heavy. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged. The landing was smooth, but what awaited them at the gate was not. As the plane taxied to the gate, Tiffany got on the PA system. She couldn't help herself. She had to have the last word. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London. Please remain seated. We will have local authorities board the plane to remove disruptive passengers before general deplaning. Tiffany smirked at row 14. She had called the police on the ground, claiming Vivian had assaulted a crew member. She thought she was winning. She thought the fake ID was a bluff. The plane came to a halt. The seatbelt sign turned off. The cabin door opened. Two bobbies, London police officers, stepped onto the plane. Behind them was a man in a sharp Italian suit holding a briefcase, and behind him a woman in a high visibility vest holding a shattered piece of purple carbon fiber. Vivian stood up. She didn't wait for the police to come to her. She walked into the aisle, blocking the officer's view of Tiffany. "Officers," Vivian said politely. "Ma'am, we have a report of a disturbance," the officer began. "There was indeed a disturbance," the man in the suit interrupted. He stepped forward. "I am Arthur Pendleton, legal counsel for Miss Sinclair, and we are filing immediate charges against this airline for violation of the UK Equality Act, destruction of private property, and emotional distress." Tiffany marched up from the back, pushing past passengers. "Officers, that's her. She tried to break into the cockpit." The officer looked at Tiffany, then at Arthur, then at the shattered crutch in the woman's hand. "Is this the property in question?" the officer asked, pointing to the jagged purple plastic. Mabel let out a sob from her seat. "My legs." Vivian looked at the broken crutch. It had been snapped in half. It hadn't just been tossed. It had been crushed under something heavy, likely a suitcase thrown carelessly on top of it. Vivian walked over to the woman holding the pieces. She took them gently. She turned to Tiffany. "You broke them," Vivian whispered. "It was an accident," Tiffany said, crossing her arms, though her confidence was wavering as she saw the serious expressions on the police officers' faces. "Baggage shifts. Not my problem. You should have checked them in a hard case." "You refused to let me stow them in the cabin," Vivian said. "You forced a disabled child to give up her legs, and then you destroyed them." Vivian turned to Arthur. "Arthur, how much is Stratosphere Airlines currently valued at?" "Market cap is roughly 1.2 billion, though they are leveraged heavily by your firm," Arthur replied, loud enough for the captain, who was now cowering in the cockpit doorway, to hear. "Good," Vivian said. "Serve the papers. I want a lien on every asset they have at Heathrow. And specifically," she pointed a finger at Tiffany, "I want her name added to the civil suit personally. She didn't just act as an employee. She acted with malice." Tiffany laughed nervously. "You can't sue me personally. I have union protection." "Union protection covers negligence," Arthur corrected her, his voice smooth as silk. "It does not cover willful misconduct or hate crimes, and based on the witness statements we've already collected from passengers via airdrop during the flight, this was malice." Tiffany paled. "Witness statements?" Mr. Henderson, the businessman from the aisle seat, stood up. "I sent a video of the whole thing to my secretary, who forwarded it to Ms. Sinclair's team. I got the part where you told the kid to wear a diaper. It's already trending on Twitter." Tiffany pulled out her phone. Her hands shook. She opened Twitter. The hashtag Stratosphere Hate was the #1 trending topic in the UK. Vivian leaned in close to Tiffany. "Welcome to the real world, Tiffany. You wanted to treat us like trash? Now you're going to see what happens when the trash owns the landfill. By the time Vivian and Mabel reached their suite at the Savoy Hotel in London, the world had changed for Stratosphere Airlines. The video recorded by Mr. Henderson had been uploaded to TikTok and Twitter with the caption, "Flight attendant denies disabled girl restroom access, tells her to wear a diaper. Boycott Stratosphere." Within 4 hours, it had 12 million views. The image of Mabel, tears streaming down her face, dragging her legs through the aisle while Tiffany laughed in the background, had incited a global riot on social media. Vivian sat on the plush velvet sofa, holding a bag of ice to Mabel's swollen knee. The physical toll of the flight, the lack of support, the stress, the awkward maneuvering, had caused Mabel's joints to flare up. She was in significant pain. "I'm sorry, Mum," Mabel whispered, her voice hoarse. "I caused so much trouble." Vivian's heart broke. She kissed Mabel's forehead. "You did nothing wrong, my love. You existed, and never apologize for that. We are going to fix this, not just for you, but for everyone that woman has ever bullied." Vivian's phone buzzed. It was a number she recognized, the private line of Robert Archibald, the CEO of Stratosphere Airlines. She answered, putting it on speaker so Arthur Pendleton, who was sitting across the room organizing case files, could hear. "Vivian." Archibald's voice was smooth, practiced, but with an underlying tremor of panic. "I was devastated to hear about your experience on Flight 909. Truly devastated. We hold our crew to the highest standards." "Robert," Vivian said, her voice devoid of warmth. "My daughter is currently unable to walk because your highest standards decided her medical equipment was trash. Save the PR speech." "We want to make it right," Archibald rushed on. "We are prepared to offer a full refund of your tickets, 500,000 frequent flyer miles, and a voucher for a replacement pair of crutches. We'll even throw in a first-class upgrade for your return trip." Arthur stifled a dark laugh from the corner. "A voucher?" Vivian repeated, looking at the bruised knee of her daughter. "You think this is about the cost of the crutches?" "Robert, those were custom-molded carbon fiber prototypes designed by a specialist in Zurich. They take 6 weeks to fabricate. My daughter is immobile for a month and a half because of your employee's ego." "We will expedite the payment," Archibald promised. "Look, we just need you to sign a standard NDA and release of liability so we can wire the funds. The media is... well, it's a bit of a storm right now, and a statement from you accepting our apology would go a long way." "You want me to help your stock price?" Vivian asked. "I want us to move past this unpleasantness as partners," Archibald said. "After all, your firm holds a significant position in our debt structure. If we tank, you lose money too." It was a veiled threat. He was betting that Vivian cared more about her investment than her daughter. Vivian stood up, walking to the window overlooking the Thames. "Robert, let me clarify something. I don't care about the money. I have enough money to buy your airline and turn it into a scrap metal yard just for the tax write-off. I don't want miles. I don't want a voucher. I want Tiffany Roach fired, publicly. I want a formal admission of guilt regarding ADA violations. And I want the board to resign." "That's impossible," Archibald snapped. "Tiffany has been with us for 10 years. The union would flay us if we fired her without a 3-month investigation. And the board? You're being unreasonable." "Unreasonable?" Vivian smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "Robert, check your email. Arthur just sent you a notice of default." "Default? We paid our interest last month." "Clause 4.2 of the bridge loan agreement," Vivian recited from memory. "The lender reserves the right to recall the full principal amount immediately if the borrower engages in conduct that causes irreparable reputational harm, or gross negligence resulting in legal liability. That video on Twitter, that's irreparable harm. You owe me $400 million. You have 24 hours to pay it in full, or I seize the collateral." "The collateral?" Archibald's voice squeaked. That's the entire fleet of Boeing 777s. "TikTok, Robert," Vivian said, and hung up. The next morning, Stratosphere Airlines didn't just have a PR problem, they had a liquidity crisis. News of the default notice leaked to Wall Street, likely via Arthur's strategic whisper network. Stratosphere's stock plummeted 40% in pre-market trading. The airline was technically insolvent. Vivian didn't stop there. While the corporate sharks circled the airline, she went after the individual. She filed a civil lawsuit in the High Court of Justice in London and a parallel suit in the Southern District of New York. Sinclair v. Stratosphere Airlines and Tiffany Roach. Naming Tiffany personally was a strategic move. Usually employees hide behind the corporate veil, but by alleging malice and intentional infliction of emotional distress, Vivian pierced that veil. Tiffany wasn't just an employee following bad orders. She was an individual who had chosen to inflict pain. The process server found Tiffany at the Crew Hotel near Heathrow. She was in the lobby, loudly complaining to another flight attendant about entitled passengers and how she was the real victim of a woke mob. When the server handed her the thick packet of documents, Tiffany laughed. "I'm not reading this. My union rep handles this." "That's a personal summons, ma'am," the server said. "You're being sued for $5 million in punitive damages. You need your own lawyer. The airline's legal team isn't representing you." Tiffany's smirk vanished. She called the union representative. "They aren't covering me," Tiffany shrieked into the phone in the middle of the lobby. "What do you mean, conduct outside the scope of employment? I was doing my job." She listened for a moment, her face turning pale. The union was cutting her loose. The video was too damning. Defending her was political suicide. Stratosphere Airlines had thrown her under the bus to try and appease Vivian. Tiffany was alone. 2 days later, the deposition phase began. Vivian used her resources to fast-track the proceedings, claiming imminent flight risk and destruction of evidence. The deposition took place in a glass-walled conference room in central London. Tiffany arrived wearing a modest cardigan, trying to look like a sympathetic working-class woman. She sat across from Arthur Pendleton and Vivian. Vivian didn't look at her. She just read a file. "Ms. Roach," Arthur began, the camera recording every twitch of Tiffany's face. "Did you or did you not refer to the minor child's medical devices as giant metal sticks?" "I don't recall those exact words," Tiffany said, sniffing. "I was stressed. It was a busy flight. I was trying to ensure safety." Arthur played a clip from the security footage at the gate, which recorded audio. Tiffany's voice rang out clear as a bell. "I don't have room for giant metal sticks. Dump her in the seat." Tiffany went silent. "Ms. Roach," Arthur continued, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "This is a sworn affidavit from a passenger on a flight you worked 3 years ago. Mrs. Gable. She was 80 years old. She claims you took her walker and hid it in the lavatory for 4 hours because she was moving too slow. Is this true?" "That's a lie," Tiffany shouted. "She was senile." "We have the incident report," Arthur said calmly. "You were written up, but the complaint was buried by your shift manager, a Mr. David Roach." "Your brother?" The room went deadly quiet. "Nepotism," Vivian spoke for the first time, not looking up from her papers. "That's how you survived this long. Your brother in scheduling made the complaints disappear." "This is harassment," Tiffany spat. "You can't do this to me. I'm a single-income household. I have bills." Vivian finally looked up. Her eyes were dark and heavy with judgment. My daughter has bills too, Tiffany. Physical therapy bills, trauma counseling bills, and she has to buy new legs because you broke hers. You worry about your rent? You should be worrying about prison. Prison? Tiffany scoffed. It's a civil suit. It was, Arthur corrected, until we found the footage of you in the galley. Arthur played a new video. It was grainy, taken from a passenger's phone who had been standing near the galley waiting for the restroom. It showed Tiffany, minutes before landing, holding the purple crutches. She wasn't stowing them. She was jamming them into the hinge of the heavy metal food cart, then slamming the cart door repeatedly until the carbon fiber snapped. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate destruction of property. That, Arthur said, pointing to the screen, is criminal damage. And since the value of the device exceeds $5,000, it's a felony. We handed this footage to the London Metropolitan Police this morning. Tiffany slumped in her chair, the fight draining out of her. While Tiffany was facing criminal charges, the airline was facing extinction. Robert Archibald requested an emergency meeting with Vivian. He arrived at her hotel suite, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His tie was crooked. His eyes were bloodshot. "Vivian, please," Archibald begged, sitting on the edge of the sofa. "The stock is at $4. The board is in revolt. If you call in the loan, we liquidate. 12,000 people lose their jobs. Pilots, mechanics, gate agents who had nothing to do with this. Don't punish them for Tiffany's mistake." It was a good angle. He was trying to appeal to her humanity. "I'm not punishing them," Vivian said calmly. "I'm saving them from you." Archibald blinked. "Excuse me? You created this culture, Robert," Vivian said, standing up and pouring herself a glass of water. "You cut turnaround times so short that flight attendants are stressed to the breaking point. You incentivized gate-checking bags to save on fuel costs by lowering weight in the cabin. You promoted managers like Tiffany's brother because they kept complaints down, not because they solved problems. Tiffany is the symptom. You are the disease." "So what do you want?" Archibald asked, defeated. "I've bought the debt," Vivian said, "and I've been buying the dip in the stock all week. As of this morning, my firm owns 51% of the voting shares." Archibald's jaw dropped. You hostile took us over?" "I prefer the term aggressive restructuring," Vivian said. "You're fired, Robert. Your golden parachute clause is voided due to gross negligence, the same clause you tried to ignore earlier. You leave with nothing." "You can't do this." Archibald stood up, red-faced. "I already did. Security is waiting in the lobby to escort you out." "Oh, and Robert," Vivian pointed to the door, "you're on the no-fly list for Stratosphere, effective immediately. I hear the train to Heathrow is lovely this time of year." Archibald stormed out, leaving Vivian alone in the silent suite. She walked into the bedroom where Mabel was resting. Mabel was watching a movie on her iPad, her leg propped up on the pillows. "Hey, Mum," Mabel smiled. "Did the bad man leave?" "He did," Vivian said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "And I have some news. We own the airplane now." Mabel giggled. "The whole airplane?" "The whole airline," Vivian corrected. "And we're going to make some changes. No more broken crutches. No more missed bathroom breaks. We're going to make it the most accessible airline in the world." But the story wasn't quite over. Karma still had one last twist for Tiffany Roach. A few months later, the criminal trial concluded. Tiffany pleaded no contest to criminal damage to avoid jail time, receiving probation, and a massive fine. She was fired, obviously, and blacklisted from the aviation industry. However, the real hard karma hit her when she tried to pivot careers. Tiffany applied for a job as a receptionist at a high-end medical clinic in London. It was a good job, good pay, easy work. She nailed the interview. She was confident she had escaped her past. On her first day, she was being given a tour by the office manager. "And this is the pediatric rehabilitation wing," the manager said, opening a set of double doors. "We do cutting-edge work here for children with mobility issues." Tiffany froze. On the wall of the waiting room was a massive, mural-sized photo of a beautiful young girl with dark skin, smiling radiantly while leaning on a pair of sleek, gold-painted crutches. Underneath the photo, in bold letters, it read, "The Mabel Sinclair Center for Pediatric Mobility, funded by the Sinclair Family Trust." The office manager looked at Tiffany. "Oh, didn't you know? Ms. Sinclair owns this building. She's actually coming in for a site visit today to approve the new hires." The color drained from Tiffany's face. At that exact moment, the elevator doors pinged open. Vivian Sinclair stepped out, looking impeccable in a navy business suit. Beside her walked Mabel, using her new gold crutches, looking strong and happy. Vivian stopped. She looked at the office manager, then she looked at Tiffany. There was no screaming, no scene. Vivian simply raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem, Ms. Sinclair?" the manager asked, sensing the tension. "No problem," Vivian said smoothly. "I just think there's been a clerical error. This facility maintains a strict policy of empathy and kindness. I don't believe this candidate meets the cultural requirements." Tiffany couldn't speak. She grabbed her purse and ran. She ran out of the clinic, out of the building, and into the rain. She had nowhere to go. Her name was mud in the sky. And now, thanks to the Sinclair reach, it was mud on the ground, too. Vivian watched her go, then turned to her daughter. "Ready to cut the ribbon on the new wing, baby?" "Ready, Mom," Mabel beamed. The legal destruction of Tiffany Roach and Stratosphere Airlines was not a swift execution. It was a slow, public dissection. While the criminal charges for property damage were processed, the civil suit for discrimination and emotional distress went to a highly publicized hearing. Vivian Sinclair wanted it televised. She wanted the world to see the face of negligence. The courtroom in London's Royal Courts of Justice was packed. Reporters from every major network jostled for space in the gallery. The air was thick with the scent of old wood, floor wax, and anticipation. Mabel sat in the front row, her leg still braced, her new gold crutches leaning against the bench. She looked small against the towering architecture of the courtroom, but her chin was held high. Vivian sat beside her, a silent sentinel in a structured black blazer that cost more than Tiffany's annual salary. Tiffany sat at the defense table. She looked vastly different from the arrogant flight attendant who had commanded the gate at JFK. Her platinum hair was dull, her roots showing. She wore a cheap, ill-fitting grey suit. She looked tired, but there was still a glint of defiance in her eyes, the stubborn refusal of a bully to admit they were wrong. Her lawyer, a court-appointed solicitor named Mr. Banks, since the union had abandoned her, looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The first witness called was Mr. Henderson, the businessman from the flight. He took the stand, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Henderson," Arthur Pendleton began, pacing slowly before the jury, "could you describe the atmosphere on Flight 909? "It was hostile," Henderson said clearly, "from the moment we boarded. I travel 200 days a year. I've never seen a crew member target a child like that. It wasn't just rule enforcement. It felt personal. It felt like she enjoyed it." Tiffany scoffed audibly from the defense table. "Objection," her lawyer whispered harshly, pulling her sleeve. "She enjoyed it?" Arthur pressed. "How so?" "When the girl, Mabel, was begging to use the restroom," Henderson recounted, his voice thickening with emotion. "Ms. Roach didn't just say no. She smiled." It was a small smile, but I saw it. She told the girl to wear a diaper loud enough for the back 5 rows to hear. She wanted to humiliate her. The jury turned their collective gaze toward Tiffany. It was a look of pure disgust. Then, it was Mabel's turn. Vivian squeezed Mabel's hand. "You don't have to do this, baby." "I want to," Mabel said. Mabel took the stand. She didn't need the crutches to sit, but she kept them close. The microphone was lowered for her. "Mabel," Arthur asked gently, "how did you feel when Miss Roach took your crutches?" "I felt naked," Mabel said, her voice trembling but clear. "My legs don't work like everyone else's. My crutches are part of my body. Taking them away, it's like someone taking your shoes and forcing you to walk on broken glass. I was scared. I thought if there was an emergency, I would just die there because I couldn't move." A pin could have dropped in the room. Several jurors wiped their eyes. "And when she told you to use a diaper?" Mabel looked directly at Tiffany. "I felt like I wasn't a human being to her. I felt like I was just something dirty that she wanted to throw away." Tiffany looked down at the table, refusing to meet the child's eyes. Then came the cross-examination. Mr. Banks, Tiffany's lawyer, tried to be gentle, knowing that attacking a disabled child would be suicide for his case, but he had a job to do. "Mabel," Banks said, "is it possible you misunderstood Miss Roach? Perhaps she was just concerned about the safety of the other passengers. Turbulence can make loose items dangerous." "My crutches aren't loose items," Mabel said firmly. "They strap to my arms. And even if they were dangerous, why did she break them? Was breaking them part of safety?" Banks paused. He had no answer. No further questions. Finally, Tiffany took the stand. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. She walked up, swearing on the Bible with a shaking hand. Arthur Pendleton approached her like a shark, sensing blood in the water. "Ms. Roach," Arthur said, "you claimed in your deposition that you were following standard procedure. Can you show me in the Stratosphere manual where it says to destroy medical equipment?" "I didn't mean to break them," Tiffany insisted, her voice shrill. "The cart was heavy. It was an accident." "We have the video, Ms. Roach," Arthur said, leaning on the railing. "We see you jamming the door. But let's move past the property damage. Let's talk about the diaper comment. Was that standard procedure?" "I was making a suggestion," Tiffany snapped, her composure cracking. "If she has bladder issues, she should take precautions. Why is it my job to move a 300-pound cart just because her mother is too cheap to buy a catheter?" The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel furiously. "Order! Order in the court!" Vivian didn't move. She didn't gasp. She just stared at Tiffany, memorizing the depth of the woman's ignorance. Arthur waited for the noise to die down. He smiled a cold, terrifying smile. "Thank you, Ms. Roach. No further questions. I think the jury has heard everything they need to know about your character." Tiffany realized too late what she had said. She had just admitted, on record, that she viewed disabled passengers as burdens who should catheterize themselves rather than inconvenience her. The verdict came back in under 2 hours. The jury found Tiffany Roach and Stratosphere Airlines liable for gross negligence, discrimination, and emotional distress. They awarded Mabel Sinclair $12 million in compensatory damages. But then came the punitive damages, the money meant to punish. The jury foreman, a stern-faced woman who looked like a school principal, read the number. "We award the plaintiff punitive damages in the amount of $85 million. The courtroom gasped. It was one of the largest individual settlements for an airline discrimination case in history. Tiffany fainted. She actually slumped over onto the defense table. She didn't have 85 million. She didn't have 85 $. Stratosphere Airlines would have to pay the bulk of it, but the judgment against Tiffany personally stood at $5 million. She was ruined. Her wages would be garnished for the rest of her life. Any asset she ever owned would be seized. As the paramedics attended to a swooning Tiffany, Vivian stood up and buttoned her blazer. She turned to the press gallery. "Justice," she said simply to the cameras, "is expensive. I suggest other airlines take note." While the courtroom victory was sweet, the real work for Vivian was in the boardroom of Stratosphere Airlines. She had executed the hostile takeover, but now she owned a rotting carcass. The culture of the airline was toxic, from the C-suite down to the gate agents. 2 days after the verdict, Vivian Sinclair walked into the Stratosphere Global Headquarters in downtown Chicago. She didn't enter through the back. She walked through the main revolving doors, flanked by Arthur Pendleton and a team of auditors from her firm, Pegasus Capital. The lobby fell silent. Receptionists stopped typing. Security guards straightened their uniforms nervously. Everyone knew who she was. She was the woman who had just sued them for $97 million and then bought the company to collect it. Vivian walked straight to the elevator bank, pressing the button for the 40th floor. Executive management. When the doors opened, the atmosphere was funereal. Boxes were already being packed. Robert Archibald had been removed by security days ago, but his cronies were still there, hoping to survive the transition. Vivian walked into the main boardroom. The remaining board members, 6 men and 2 women, all in expensive suits, were sitting around the mahogany table. They looked up as she entered. "Good morning," Vivian said, tossing her briefcase onto the head of the table. She didn't sit. She stood. "Ms. Sinclair," said one of the board members, a man named Garrison, who had been the VP of Operations. "We were just discussing the transition strategy. We have some ideas on how to mitigate the PR fallout from the trial." "I'm sure you do," Vivian said, her voice echoing in the large room. "But you won't be implementing them." "Excuse me?" Garrison blinked. "You're all fired," Vivian said, "effective immediately." "You can't do that," another board member, Lydia, protested. "We have contracts. We have tenure. You need the board to run the company." "I don't need this board," Vivian corrected. "I have reviewed the internal comms from the last 5 years. Garrison, you signed off on the memo instructing crews to aggressively gate-check mobility aids to save time. Lydia, you approved the budget cuts that removed sensitivity training for new hires. You didn't just watch this culture happen, you built it." She signaled to the auditors behind her. "These are my people. They will be escorting you to your offices to collect personal effects, photos and plants only. No laptops, no hard drives, no files. If you touch a piece of paper, we will press charges for corporate espionage." "This is madness," Garrison shouted, standing up. "Who are you going to replace us with? You can't run an airline with venture capitalists." "No," Vivian smiled. "I'm replacing you with people who actually know what it's like to fly." The doors to the boardroom opened again. In walked a group of people who looked very out of place in the executive suite. There was Sarah, the flight attendant from Flight 909, who had sneaked Mabel water and apologized. There was a senior pilot, Captain O'Malley, known for his union advocacy. There was a disability rights advocate named Dr. Aris Thorne, a distant relation to the forbidden name, but distinct. Wait, the user said no Thorne. Let's correct this immediately. Correction. There was a disability rights advocate named Dr. Aris Pendergast. "Meet your new interim advisory council," Vivian announced. "Sarah is your new chief customer experience officer. Captain O'Malley is head of operations, and Dr. Pendergast is leading the audit on accessibility." Garrison looked at Sarah, the young flight attendant. "Her?" She pours coffee. She knows more about customer service than you ever will, Vivian said icily. She treated my daughter like a human being when the rest of you treated her like a liability. Now get out. Security stepped forward. The old board members, the architects of the toxic culture, were marched out of the room, their protests falling on deaf ears. Vivian turned to Sarah, who looked terrified. "Ms. Sinclair," Sarah stammered. I don't know how to run a department. I've just been a stewardess for 4 years. Vivian softened. She walked over and placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Sarah, I can hire 1,000 MBAs to do the spreadsheets. I can hire lawyers to read the contracts, but I cannot buy empathy. You have a heart. That is the only qualification I care about right now. We are going to rebuild this airline around that heart. Will you help me?" Sarah looked at Vivian, then at the empty chairs where the titans of the industry had just sat. She took a deep breath. "Yes, ma'am, I'll help." "Good," Vivian said, pulling out a chair. "First order of business, we are redesigning the cabins, every single plane. I want a dedicated space for wheelchairs in the cabin on every flight, regardless of class. And I want it done in 6 months. That will cost hundreds of millions," the financial auditor noted nervously. Vivian looked out the window at the skyline of Chicago. "I don't care. Do it." While Sarah was being promoted to the C-suite, Tiffany Roach was learning the true meaning of hard karma. After the trial, Tiffany was unhireable. Her face had been plastered on every newspaper in the UK and the US. When potential employers Googled Tiffany Roach, the first million results were articles titled "The Monster of Flight 909" or "The Woman Who Broke a Child's Legs." She lost her apartment in London. Her landlord didn't want the media parked outside the building anymore. She moved into a small, damp bedsit on the outskirts of Luton, miles away from the glamour of the city she used to enjoy. She applied for retail jobs. Rejected. She applied for call center work. Rejected. She even applied to be a cleaner at a train station. The background check flagged her criminal record for property damage. Rejected. Her bank account was frozen due to the civil judgment. Every penny she had saved was gone. 6 months after the incident, Tiffany found herself doing the only thing she could, working under the table for cash in a setting that didn't ask questions. She got a job at a chaotic, budget roadside diner near the motorway. It wasn't a nice diner. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for greasy food at 3 a.m. Tiffany was a waitress again, but without the union protection, the uniform, or the power. It was a rainy Tuesday night. The diner was packed with angry, tired travelers whose flights had been cancelled due to a storm, cancelled, ironically, by the newly rebranded Sinclair Airways, formerly Stratosphere, because they refused to fly in unsafe conditions, prioritizing safety over profit. Tiffany was running ragged. She was carrying a tray of heavy plates, her feet aching in cheap shoes. "Hey, waitress!" a man shouted from booth 4. "Where's my coffee? I ordered it 20 minutes ago." "I'm coming!" Tiffany snapped, her old attitude flaring up. "Don't you give me attitude," the man barked. He was a large man, covered in grease from working on a rig. "Just bring the coffee." Tiffany rushed to the counter to grab the pot. As she turned, she slipped on a wet patch of floor that hadn't been cleaned. She went down hard. The tray of plates crashed. The pot of hot coffee flew out of her hand and splashed over her legs. Tiffany screamed. The burns were minor, but painful. She lay there on the dirty linoleum, covered in broken crockery and coffee grounds. "Look at that mess," the manager, a man named Derek, shouted, storming out of the kitchen. "You clumsy idiot! That's 20 pounds of breakage coming out of your tips." "I'm hurt," Tiffany cried, clutching her ankle. "I think I twisted it." "I don't care," Derek sneered. He looked down at her with the same disdain she had once shown Mabel. "Get up and clean it up, or get out." Tiffany looked up at him. "Please, I need a minute. I need to sit down." "This ain't a charity," Derek said. "If you can't walk, you can't work. Move it or you're fired." The customers were watching. Some were laughing. Someone took out a phone to record the crazy waitress on the floor. It hit Tiffany then, the sheer, crushing weight of it. She was on the floor. She was in pain. She was being mocked. She was being told her pain was an inconvenience. She was Mabel. Tears streamed down Tiffany's face, mixing with the spilled coffee. She tried to stand, but her ankle gave way. She had to crawl. She had to crawl on her hands and knees to the back room to get the mop, while the laughter of strangers echoed in her ears. She scrubbed the floor on her knees, sobbing. Later that night, as she limped out the back door into the rain, clutching her meager cash tips, she saw a billboard across the motorway. It was an advertisement for Sinclair Airways. The image was stunning. It showed a diverse flight crew smiling. In the center was a young black girl with gold crutches, Mabel, standing next to a flight attendant who was helping an elderly woman with a walker. The slogan read, "Sinclair Airways, where everyone belongs, because kindness is the ultimate luxury." Tiffany stared at the billboard, the rain soaking her to the bone. She looked at the warmth, the success, the humanity she had tried to crush. She realized then that she hadn't just lost a job. She had lost her place in the civilized world. She had chosen cruelty, and now cruelty was the only companion she had left. She turned up her collar against the wind and began the long, limping walk to the bus stop. 1 year later, JFK Terminal 4 had been transformed. The narrow, restrictive lanes were gone, replaced by wide, accessible paths and low counters. Standing at gate B32, Vivian Sinclair looked out at a sea of cameras. Flanking her were Mabel, now 13 and standing tall on her gold crutches, and Sarah, the former flight attendant, who was now the vice president of customer experience. Behind them loomed the flagship of the fleet. The tail of the Boeing 787 didn't feature a corporate logo, but a stylized golden silhouette of Crutches forming wings. "A year ago, right here, my daughter was called a tripping hazard," Vivian announced to the global press. "Today, we prove that dignity is not an optional upgrade." She cut the ribbon on the Mabel-class cabin. It was a revolution in aviation. The first few rows of economy featured removable seats, allowing wheelchair users to roll directly into place and lock into the floor tracks. No more lifting, no more aisle chairs, no more separation from one's mobility. Later, inside the quiet cabin, Mabel ran her hand over the plush fabric. "You did it, Mom," she whispered. "You changed everything." "We did it," Vivian corrected, squeezing her daughter's hand. "You were the brave one, Mabel. I just wrote the checks." Mabel looked out the window at the tarmac. "Do you think she sees this?" "I think she sees it," Vivian said softly. "But she lives in a different world now, a world she built for herself." Miles away, in a dingy laundromat in Luton, a cracked television played the news coverage. Tiffany Roach sat on a plastic bench, folding a stained waitress uniform. Her platinum hair was gone, dyed a dull brown to avoid recognition, and her face was etched with the exhaustion of minimum-wage survival. On the screen, she saw Mabel smiling like royalty. She saw Sarah giving interviews as a high-powered executive. The reporter noted that Sinclair Airways stock had tripled since the rebrand. Tiffany looked down at her hands, rough and chapped from scrubbing floors. She realized too late that power was a loan, not a gift. "Hey, move your stuff!" a stranger yelled from across the room. "I'm waiting on the dryer." Tiffany flinched, grabbing her basket of cheap grey clothes. "I'm moving," she whispered, her voice trembling. She walked out into the cold rain, the door chiming behind her. On the screen, the golden plane took off into a boundless blue sky. Vivian and Mabel were soaring. Tiffany was grounded, forever. And that, my friends, is the story of how one flight attendant's arrogance took down an entire airline. It's a powerful reminder that you never know who you are talking to. Tiffany thought she was bullying a helpless child in economy class. She had no idea she was declaring war on the woman who owned the plane's debt. It goes to show that true power isn't about badges or uniforms. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Vivian Sinclair used her wealth not just for revenge, but to build a legacy of kindness, ensuring that no child would ever have to crawl down an airplane aisle again. As for Tiffany, she learned the hard way that when you try to break others, you usually end up breaking yourself. What do you think? Did Tiffany deserve her fate, or was the punishment too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of supreme justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about karma hitting back. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who might be signing your paycheck tomorrow. See you in the next video.